Hi everybody, this is Quarantine Day 32, and this is the evening episode. Alright, one thing, I've been kind of waiting for this to come into the more main part of the media and coverage, but it's about the origin of the virus, and that's something that's pretty interesting to me, and I'm going to try to cover this as neutrally as possible, not trying to get into the politics of it, but it is an interesting topic to me, and very relevant to what we're all going through, although I don't really think we're going to get a for sure answer. So one thing that I can kind of get irked with is when we have like a discussion and somebody says something and then the response is like, but no, and it's like it didn't address the thing. So the question today is, or the thought today is that perhaps this virus did not come from a wet market. That's the narrative I've been going with. But it was leaked from a lab. And the response to that is this virus, at least in how we're looking at it, does not appear to be like engineered in a lab. And although it seems like that's an answer to that question, it's like a miss. So that's not really an answer to that question, because labs that study viruses are not generally engineering viruses. Yeah. So that's probably about as simple as I can put it. A lot of labs that are studying viruses are studying like more of like what we can do to affect a virus, what we can do to immunize animals against a virus. They're not really doing a lot of work to engineer the most dangerous virus ever. So a lot of labs use animals, and that's a subject that other people can address that. I understand that's very controversial. I understand why. I understand why we need to use animals. That's a complicated question, but a lot of labs have animals in them, and they're getting inoculated, and things are happening in relation to viruses with those animals. So the thought that a virus was leaked from a lab is not really saying it was engineered by a lab. Experts are saying we can just basically only look at the virus itself. This doesn't appear to be engineered. As far as where it comes from, I don't know if we'll ever really know. That's a really hard thing to evidence. So it's kind of interesting. Sometimes governments put out a story, and just from contextualizing that story, it's like, no. So like a good example is that tragic incident with the passenger plane getting shot down by Iran. It happened a few months ago. And so the official story was, it was like a mechanical failure or something. And then you had pilots, you had experts in the field, and you just had kind of videos, all sorts of evidence kind of coalescing and saying, no. And then finally that evidence mounts, and the government had to change their story. They knew originally, of course, what the real situation was, but they lie. That's what happens sometimes. So, again, not trying to go super political with this. That's not the intention of the channel. It's just that this is a conversation that's happening now, and I just want to make sure that we're I don't like the whole like where you say something and then it just misses. So I think kind of just people that I've talked to and understanding China in America, we are kind of a little bit like ignorant. We just see China is just one country, but China's like the U.S. It has regions, and I think it'd be good to maybe just kind of put like an analog together just for our American brains to try to understand what like Chinese Americans are saying, like why this doesn't make sense that you would have this virus start from a wet market in Wuhan. Okay, so just try to putting an analog together. Say there was like a disease, a virus that came from raising alligators and consuming alligators. Very unlikely. Alligators are very distantly, they don't share a lot of genes with us compared to a lot of other animals, so this isn't really that part of the analog. Don't worry about that. But say that it was just alligator for whatever reason, that's the carrier of the virus. And you had a previous outbreak that was in the Gulf Coast states. Where is alligator meat consumed? Generally, like Louisiana, Florida, maybe parts of Texas, maybe parts of Mississippi, maybe parts of Alabama. Just around that Gulf Coast, you have a larger consumption of alligator. Probably Louisiana would be the hub of that. So that's kind of what happened in China with the first SARS outbreak. You had it's kind of along this southern provinces of China, bordering into like Vietnam, and that's where it was, and like Hong Kong is connected to that, so that's where this outbreak occurred. So that was consistent. So like say that you have these Gulf Coast states having that first outbreak of some disease that goes along with the alligator meat. So then you would have your big CDC laboratory that studies viruses, in particular the virus that that was studied that infected alligator meat. And we could say that that laboratory was in St. Louis. Probably a good analog for where like Wuhan is in the big picture of America versus China. And so I know the CDC is in Atlanta, but like I think it would be like even further than Atlanta, more kind of like southern Midwest. So say that the big laboratory studying that was in St. Louis, and you had this big virus outbreak in St. Louis, and the government response was, oh, it was such and such meat market where they were selling alligator meat. That, do you see where like that is sort of like, I don't maybe believe you. That's where that would come from. Alligator meat, St. Louis, but we have this other lab here where they're doing a lot of work on this disease anyway. So that's where that kind of red flag comes up, and why just a lot of people are not really going with the story that it was some market. Yeah, so I'm not going to really bring my opinion into it, but I just want to kind of create like a little bit of like understanding of like distances, if that was to take place, what does that, why is the context just all wrong? Like, why is it here? That's a really weird coincidence. The logic in my brain might go one direction, often to the more simple answer of what it is rather than the official answer. So, yeah, just that's part of what I wanted to kind of talk about as this becomes a discussion. So feel free to let me know what your thoughts are. I think this is going to be a conversation that's ongoing. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily that productive conversation, because it might not be that we ever know. I mean, anybody who would be a whistleblower about this in China, I don't think they're gonna really allow them to just get on Twitter or whatever and just kind of give us the full lowdown on it. So, yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. Bye.